Shalom, everyone. It's a pleasure again to be here in this very, very special conference, How to Nurture Healthy Emotions. Healthy emotions. We are in the period which is between Pesach and Shavuot, and at this time we have a very special power. It's a very potent time to be able to change and transform our emotions. Emotions are very, very difficult to change. An emotional person, the Talmud says that the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, between one which is righteous and one which is wicked, is tzaddik libam bichshutam. The tzaddik is a master of his heart. Reshaim, the wicked, bichshut libam. They are mastered by their hearts. So to be able to transform my emotions is something which is very difficult, very a great challenge for all of us. But first of all, let's explain what are emotions. When do we first see the concept of emotions in the Torah? The first time we see the concept of emotions is the fact that God created the world. God created the world in 6 days. God could have created the world in 1 day. On the 7th day he rested. What is this concept of creating the world in 6 days? The first day, God emanates his light, emanates creation. It's a day for chesed, kindness, attraction, revelation. The second day, God separates the higher waters from the lower waters. This is a moment of severity. The third day is a moment of synergy, where the work of the second day and the third day come together, and it's the day of tiferet, of harmony. That's why it says twice in the Torah the word kitov, it was good. It was good for the end of the second day's work, and it was good for the third day's work. So we see that every single day of the week is another emotion. Wednesday already represents the concept of, what do we have? Chesed, kindness, Sunday. Gvura, severity, rigor on Monday. The third day we have Tiferet. The fourth day we have Netzach. Netzach is the concept of victory, eternity. And then we have Thursday, Hod, the concept of beauty. We are actually in the 5th week of the Omer, where we celebrate Hod, which has to do with humility and beauty at its purest possible state. And finally, we have the 6th day, which is what? Yesod, foundation, connection, connecting. And finally, we have the 7th day, which the 7th day is Shabbat, is royalty. Every one of these facets, of these aspects, is another type of reflection, channel, through which God expresses himself through his creation in the world. It's another emotion. So if you think about it, what are emotions? What are feelings? Emotions is time. Yes, emotions is time. Give you a perfect example for this. If a person is at a red light and he's waiting for a very, very important appointment and he doesn't want to be late, this is the appointment of a lifetime. Or God forbid, he needs to go to court. At that moment, that 1 minute can appear like an hour. Then again, if you're with your loved one, things are going well. If you are with a child and you appreciate what they do, or you're enjoying a lecture, so sometimes an hour can appear to be just like 10 minutes. So we see that the value of time is the emotional value that we give to time. So if a person is able to control his emotions, a person is actually able to control his time. Actually, what do you think is the greatest disturbance to our using our time properly? Anyone? Obviously, none of you want to answer because we're separated and united at the same time by this this incredible tool called the internet. How is it possible to become a master of your time? How is it possible to become more focused once you are a master of your emotions? You see, there are two triangles in the Magen David. There's the triangle that goes up, and there's the triangle that goes down. The triangle that goes up represents the mind. Chokhmah, wisdom, bina, understanding, da'at, or da'at, which is connection, focus, the synergy of both brains. The right brain is the brain that actually opens up creativity, intelligence, a higher sense of meaning, where you are at a loss before something which is greater than you. And when you are at a loss, you surrender to a higher power. That's why it is called in Kabbalah and referred to in Tanya in the name of the Tikkunei Zohar as Chokhmah. Chokhmah, wisdom, is called Koach Ma. If I'm not mistaken, it's this week in our chapter of Pirkei Avot that we read about Ezeu Chacham, who is wise, Halomed Mikol Adam, the person that's able to learn from everyone, with the person which is able to surrender to another person's advantage. That's how we're going to translate it. Chokhmah, Koach Ma. I want to tell you that for years I was studying in yeshiva, and I've been studying Tanya for Baruch Hashem reading it for many years, and I'm starting to study Tanya, let's put it that way. And as I go deeper, I ask myself, what is this thing? We always said and repeat every year when we study chapter 3, Chokhmah, wisdom, is the power of what? What is the power of what? The power of what is. Chokhmah is a very great intellectual capacity. Chokhmah gives us the capacity to be able to withdraw ourselves and open up to a higher knowledge. It's the power of what is. When I completely put myself aside, and instead of being the one which is going to involve my intellect in the knowledge, in dissecting it, in comparing it, in going deeper into it, in doing some type of deeper analysis, I'm there and I'm just a recipient. The koach, the power of what? I am what? Actually, Moshe and Aaron, Moshe and his brother Aaron, Ed venachnu ma. You know what we are? We're what? What are we? As if we said, we are what? What concept of we are what? And you'll see in a second how that matters in the way that we master our time. So, basically, how do we do that? How do we do that? Chokhmah is the intellectual capacity to be able to lose ourselves. I'm going to give you two examples that show this. A person, a friend of mine, went, I remember, to the embassy of Morocco. I was studying in the south of France in yeshiva, and he went to the embassy of Morocco. He came 2 minutes late, lost the train ride, and couldn't make it that Monday. The second day, he went to the embassy of Morocco. And when he got there, he saw a sign on the door saying, the embassy will be closed on Monday because of the king's birthday. So my friend came back to me and says, wow, look at what God did. I could have wasted a whole day of Torah study, 2 days, but I came late, and because I came late, I didn't waste a full day. At the moment that he saw that sign, what happened to him? He was just like, wow, I can't react. I don't have any intellectual capacity to analyze what's happening. I'm just at a loss on how there's a bigger plan. I surrender to that bigger plan. That's one concept of chokhmah, of wisdom. I open myself up. Now, a second example of chokhmah is when a person is studying. When you study Talmud, it's incredible. You get this more and more. You ask a question, you make a comparative analysis, and suddenly you're stuck. You're stuck. You're looking for that word. You're looking for that language. You're looking for that answer. You're looking for that solution. Even sometimes in business matters, one can have that. And suddenly, boom, it hits you like a lightning, and everything is clear. And at that moment, you're just lost, just like if you're in front of an image, right? Our sages teach us that Rav in the Talmud, when he would have these moments of illumination, and there would be an argument between the rabbis, it says, Shatak Rav, halacha kerav. Rav, the rabbi, stood quiet, stood silent. And then it says that even though he was silent, the law is like him. The final ruling is like him. Why? Because while we understand it as a process which is intellectual, Rav is just seeing it with his own eyes. Why am I mentioning this? You'll see in a minute. Chokhmah is the purest state of knowledge without the involvement of ego, of self. I'm going to repeat that so I get it and I understand it a little better, hopefully. Chokhmah, wisdom, is a complete surrender of self with absolutely no obstruction of one's ego, which means I can completely become a channel to absorb the higher knowledge. Now, Bina, on the other hand, is the power of development. It develops and develops things and details it. It's just like the relationship between the male part of the brain and the female part of the brain. One brings the seed, the other one develops it into a whole child. Just like the first letter of Hashem's name, the Yud, and just like the second letter of Hashem's name, the Hey. The Yud is nothing but a dot. The Hey is already has height, depth, and width development. When you bring the two together and you're able in detail to express the original idea, you have what's called Da'at. Now, Da'at is very, very, very powerful, right? Chokhmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Da'at, fusion, clarity, focus. Today, unfortunately, if I had to rename the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, I would give him the name distraction. Because that concept of Da'at is the most needed, more than ever now, and people don't have it because they don't have what's called Yishuv Hadat, which means a settling of the mind. Now, what is a settling of the mind? When things are clear in my mind. The clearer they are in my mind, the greater my mind is, the larger my mind is, the greater vision I have, the more global and detailed vision I have of the process, the more this is in perfect fusion with me, the more my mind is able to dominate my emotions. The more I can become a master of my time. As we expressed before, time is emotions. I'm going with a plan. Now, there's a doctor in the 1700s by the name of Dr. Klaprad. He was a French doctor. And he made a very interesting experiment with a lady which had memory loss. He went to see her. And he said to this lady, ma'am, my name is Dr. Klaprad. And he held out his hand. The lady shook the doctor's hand. And he came back 5 minutes later and said, do you remember me? I'm sorry, I never met you, she said. My name is Dr. Klaprad. and handed his hand again. This happened over and over again. The lady would keep forgetting him and getting, again, reacquainted with him each time. And finally he decided to do in his experiment something very special. He put the little needle and put it between his hands, between his fingers, I'm sorry, and he shook her hand. He said, "My name is Dr. Klaproth," and she said, "Ouch!" Pulled back his hand, left the room, came back in the room 5 minutes later. "Ma'am, do you remember me?" "No." "Did you ever meet me?" She says, "No, I'm sorry, I don't know you, sir." And he extends his hand, and the lady pulls back her hand and says, and doesn't want to give her the hand. So he doesn't understand. There's a big problem here. On one hand, she doesn't remember me. On the other hand, she remembers she had a bad experience with me. Right? It's like a first marriage, but that was a joke. Anyways, on one hand, you don't remember me. On the other hand, you remember that something attached us together and it was bad, it was negative. What happened over there? Dr. Klaproth came to the following conclusion, that there are two types of memories. There is the memory of an emotion, and there is what we call an emotional memory. What is the difference between the memory of an emotion and an emotional memory? I can remember that I felt so good when my mother was caressing my hair, when I had curly hair when I was a child, and I was in my bed and she was tucking me in my bed. Okay, I remember an emotion. And then there are times that something is said, something is done, and it touches the core connection between your mind and your emotion. That's an emotional memory. That key, which is called the key in the Zohar and Chassidus, is called Maftecha de Kalil Shis. It is the key that contains the 6 emotions inside. It's when I'm in perfect sync between the mind and the emotion, and I'm not only processing some logical, intellectual information, but I'm actually absorbing it emotionally. For those of you who had the pleasure 2 weeks ago to study Ve'adarta Pnei Zaken, the Ma'amar, the Hasidic discourse in Likutei Torah, over there he speaks about emotional memory. Being able to carve the words of Torah not only at the level of the mind, but at the level of the heart. And actually, if you want a reference, you could look into the Talmud of Yevamot. The Talmud of Yevamot on page 117 says at the bottom of the page the following: the same way one sees his reflection, just like I see my reflection now on the screen, so too, which means if I smile, I'll see a smiling face, right? And God forbid the opposite. So too the heart of man affects man. Rashi, the classical commentary, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki of Troyes in France, says the following. He says, B'divrei Torah amru. This was taught about the words of Torah, the teaching of Torah. Im harav en masbir panim לתלמיד, התלמיד מחכים מרבו. ואם אין הרב מסביר תלמיד לתלמיד, פנים לתלמיד, אין התלמיד מחכים מרבו. Rashi says, if the rabbi, the teacher, the intellect, is cheerful to the student will become smart from this teacher. But if the teacher is not cheerful, passionate, emotional about his teaching, then the student will not become wise from such a teacher. As much as it applies in the relationship between teacher and student, the teacher of the emotions is the mind. If our mind is able to absorb things in a way that it gets excited about things, not an external, superficial, show-off type of excitement. No, an excitement at the sharpness of the knowledge. You've got it so clear, right? You are amazed. You're taken back by the great godly wisdom there is here. Then at that moment, you start transforming your emotions. Then at that moment, you become someone which is able to absorb. I have a rabbi, a teacher, which we call a mashpia, somebody that is a spiritual guide more than someone that gives responses and answers to halachic questions of law, of Judaism. He answers more things of the soul, how to serve Hashem, how to get closer, how to overcome your different temptations and so on. And one day I was at a wedding in Kfar Chabad, a wedding of his son, and there were many of the students of the yeshiva where he is a mashpia. And I asked one of the students, how come he knows the whole Torah in such a precise way? I think we're hearing some background noise in the back.
הוא כבר מלוכלך, ננקה אותו אחר כך.
אתה תנקה את זה? באמת? לא, מה ביחד? לא, באמת, אני חייב שהוא... נקיים שיהיה נקי.
So, we are back.
מה זאת אומרת?
The story is like this. I asked one of the students, how come he knows every part, every single discourse that the Rebbe said, that are said in Chassidus, comments of the Talmud, he could quote you everything. How come he is so fluent? So one of the students told me that he was asked that question. And he said, look, when you get excited about something, you remember it. So his nature is that intellectually, he was always stimulated by everything. When a person is able to turn on, that the stimulation should not be an emotional stimulation. Because what is this generation all about? It's about always trying to stimulate the emotions. Get excited about the new iPhone, get excited about, that new model of this new thing, you need it. And everybody gets excited, and we follow all these excitement. But excitement is something which is external to you. It's not something that you absorb. They say a story of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, and his colleague, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichov, the known defender of the Jewish people. Then one day, they were both students of the Magid of Mezrich, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Magid started saying a discourse. The Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichov got so excited. His heart couldn't handle it. He was making somersaults. At the end of the lecture, he came to the Alter Rebbe and said, what did the Magid say? What did he say after he said this? And the Alter Rebbe said, what do you want? You were so excited with your emotions that you weren't able to absorb it. Even if you want to feel things in an emotional way, it has to be with self-mastery. A few examples of self-mastery. At the time that the Tzemach Tzedek was in prison, the Rabbi Israel of Ruzhin was in prison as well. This story I heard from Rabbi Kagan when I was a young student in 770. And I asked him, what is the difference between midot shebesechel, sechel shebimidot? What is the difference between intellectual emotions and emotional intellect? And he told me the following, very simple. One day, both of them, the Tzemach Tzedek and Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, great Hasidic leaders and masters, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin was such a holy man, he could open his Tehillim. And the Tzemach Tzedek said on him that when he opened his Tehillim, his book of Psalms, he was able to see what was happening in one end of the world to the other. And all the heavens were open before him. So both of them were in jail. And the Tsar of Russia, the Tsar of Russia, disguised as or was it the head of the prison, I'm not sure exactly what it was, a minister, wanted to see the difference on Friday night when they make Kiddush. He went and he peeked to see how Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, which represents those Hasidim which serve God more with the emotions. And he was holding his cup. And his whole head started becoming red. He was sweating in the excitement of making Kiddush on Friday night. His hands started trembling, and there was only a cup. The Tzemach Tzedek, on the other hand, his composure was complete self-mastery. He was turning red, sweating, and you could feel the intensity, the electricity in the air, but he wasn't moving. So the Tsar said, this one is better. This one is emotions the way it's directed by intellect. It's not godly emotions which direct intellect. Both of them are godly and holy, don't get me wrong. So, to come back to what we're saying before. What does it mean? How do you get that self-mastery? What is having these healthy emotions? It starts discipline, personal limits, to be able to know exactly how to control yourself. Why am I doing things? Am I doing things to satisfy myself, to give myself a pleasure? Or am I doing things in order to attain a higher level of self-mastery? There's one particular stories, which for me show this mastery. And this is with the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. One story is said that when one day the Rebbe Rashab saw through the window his son, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, give, I think it was a piece of watermelon, he had two pieces of watermelon in his hands, one bigger one, one smaller one, gave the bigger one to his friend. The Rebbe Rashab called him over. Not at that moment, exact moment. He called him over and he told him, please, I want to see you tomorrow morning. I want to talk with you at 10 a.m. Okay. The child showed up at 10 a.m. and the Rabbi Rashab did three things. A, he commended him. I want to tell you, I looked through the window and I saw what you were doing. Peace to your friend. That's beautiful. The second thing he told him was, next time your friend asks you for something, or next time you want to share with your friend, give him both pieces. He wanted to instill in his son a complete self-sacrifice for another. Even as a child, sometimes it's good to give up completely on my personal pleasure. You have to be a master of yourself. What's extraordinary for me in this story is three things. A, he didn't call the child right away. So, if you call the child right away when it happens, it doesn't have the same effect. He wanted the child to become a vessel, a recipient, to be able to receive the information, to make an introspection. We told him tomorrow at 10 a.m. Meanwhile, the child is thinking, what is happening tomorrow? Why is my father calling me? Okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What could I have done? Maybe. Okay, you're already ready to receive. Second step, I commend you on what you did. Third step, you could have been much better. And I expect from you to be much better. That's how you pull a person to a much higher level. Guiding him, not scolding him, but guiding him towards his higher level. This is the purpose of Chokhmah. Self-mastery. I surrender. There's no ego here, right? I'm completely giving myself over. I put myself out of the picture. Important now. Not what I feel like doing now, but what's important now. A second story, which for me is even more impressive, is the fact that when one day the Rebbe Rashab was studying with his study partner, that same previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was a baby in a crib. And the learning partner of the Rebbe Rashab turned to him and said, your son is really beautiful. You know, there's a light shining out of his face. What is the normal reaction of a father, especially to a baby that's special, you know? Somebody tells you that, it opens your heart, and the first natural thing to do is to kiss the child. And I challenge any of you to hold a child in your hands and not to kiss him. It's almost impossible. At that moment, the Rebbe Rashab's first reaction was, I want to kiss the child. He took that emotion, transformed it, and said, 1 second. I'm having inside of me a desire. Desire satisfied something which is personal. Let me take that desire, redirect it, and bring it as a sacrifice, as an offering to God. That's my interpretation of what happened. And instead, he wrote a Hasidic discourse. He wrote a whole dissertation on Kabbalistic and esoteric concepts for his son. It was what we call a Hasidic kiss. Not a physical kiss, but a Hasidic kiss. I want to give you something which is going to last for a second, which you might not feel, might not be affected, will just satisfy my 1 second for my one moment. Instead, I'm going to give you something eternal, something deeper, something that's going to connect you to your essence. You think that's impressive? He did not tell his son that he did that till his son became bar mitzvah. You think that's impressive? He waited another 2 years after that to actually give him over the Hasidic discourse so he could study it. So now, not only did he have self-mastery, he didn't want to give himself that satisfaction. He wanted to teach self-mastery to his son. Of course, it's not done in a way which is a vicious way. I want to teach you. No. I have self-mastery. I'm able to say no, to push it off another 10 minutes. Okay? For the Rebbe Rashab to transform it completely. At the moment that I have the desire to eat that last piece of sushi when I'm sitting with my friend at the table, I think of my connection to God and I take the piece of sushi and put it in his plate instead. Just an example. So, another thing that I would like to mention, since we're speaking about these two giants, the Rebbe Rashab and the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, masters of time, masters of emotion. The Rebbe Rashab, at the age when his son was 13, turned bar mitzvah, he called him over and told him 3 things. He said, my son, I want to have a talk with you. This is the talk of a father to a son, which I call this talk a talk of self-mastery, a talk of how to nurture proper emotions. What is the core of proper emotions? Emet, truth. being able to be real. We are in a fake world. If you're able to be real, you're good. There's a flow of this part, which is the surrender to Hashem, where you become a channel. Your ego is not involved. You're not disturbed by what's happening around you. So the Rebbe Rashab tells him, my son, today you are bar mitzvah. I would like to ask from you 3 things. Number 1, I don't want you to fool yourself. Why do we fool ourselves? Why do we fool ourselves? Why do we try to project in our heads? We have this self-image, which is so distorted sometimes. We think we are what we're not. We wish we would be. He says, no, don't fool yourself. You are who you are. Like the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said, everyone has to know what their potential is in utmost details. Why? In order to know how much to demand from yourself. The beginning of serving God is to be able to know and accept you. You accept yourself. Don't put yourself down. Accept who you are. Once you have that honest look at yourself, your life flows. You don't have the need to fool yourself into thinking you are what you're not. The Alter Rebbe answers somebody in the great Sefer, great book called Me'ah She'arim, questions and answers. A student writes to the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe, I feel very depressed. I fell from such a high place to a low place, and I feel terrible. What should I do? The Alter Rebbe answers him back, first of all, being depressed is only going to bring you to sin again. Second of all, you're going to hear it, you'll understand what I just did with my hands. Second of all, I want to tell you, you have nothing to be depressed about, because you weren't in such a high place to start with, and therefore the fall wasn't that great. A person has to be honest with who I am. If you're going to be honest with who you are and realize these are my struggles. I struggle with laziness. I struggle with anger. I struggle with concentration. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Who do you want to transform? The person you think you are or the person you are? So the beginning is just accept who you are. That's the first message of the Rebbe Hashem to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Self-mastery. Don't fool yourself. Boy, that's such a weight off our shoulders. I'm not going to fool myself. The second thing he told him, my son, you have a bar mitzvah today. I want you not to fool others. What do you mean not to fool others? You know, many times you have these people today, you know, like a marketing technique. Oh, you're such a tzaddik. You're such a holy guy. Oh, you're a great guy. Right? אפילו כל העולם כולו אומרים לך, צדיק אתה, אהיה בעיניך כרשע. The Alter Rebbe teaches us that even if the whole world is telling you you're such a holy man, you're a righteous man and everything, in your eyes, you should know that even if what they're saying is true, at any moment you could slip back in the abyss. And your animal soul could take completely over. Therefore, you're never a full master of yourself. So don't fool yourself that you are where you're not. And don't try to fool others. Don't take advantage of the image that others have of you. Many times when we fool others, we feel a sense of ego. The ultimate is to be pure. There's a rabbi that's a great, great sage of Torah. But I say something publicly, maybe I shouldn't be saying it publicly, I shouldn't be mentioning his name, but I will. His name is Rabbi Leibel Shapiro. Leibel Shapiro is a great man, very, very wise, brilliant man in Torah. And not coming from a Hasidic background myself, when I first encountered this Rosh Yeshiva, it bothered me. It bothered me that there wasn't some type of great ooh-ah. You know, he's a great Rosh Yeshiva. You know, we're going to feel it all over. It's going to be a great excitement like at Mount Sinai. No. Everything flows in a calm, clear, pure way. There's no show. I'm not trying to fool anybody. I'm trying to get to the essence of what is the truth. You understand the difference? This is the difference of self-mastery. Somebody that has self-mastery in his Torah doesn't try to fool anybody. That's not what's important in his life. So don't fool anybody. And like this, you get to the truth. The third thing he told him is, he told his son, is don't let others fool you. A part of being honest with yourself and being honest with others is to not let others fool you. It's not because you want to be sincere, true, you're going to be real, that you need to be a fool. You need to be honest, and you need to demand honesty just by your presence. So my friends, when we talk about self-mastery, it starts with honesty in the mind, clarity of the mind, taking away all these obstructions, surrendering to a higher level, being excited about what's true, connecting to the truth, wanting to know what the answer is. You know, they say that Musa says a story that one of the great wealthy men of Eastern Europe was looking for a son-in-law for his daughter. And he went to a kollel, to a yeshiva, and he said to the Rosh Yeshiva, whoever answers the question of the Talmud, the Talmudic question I'm going to ask, the right way, I will give my daughter to him, and I will support him for the rest of his life. He'll be able to study Torah. So what happened? This one tried to give an answer. This one, nobody came up with the answer. After 3 days, he left. And as he's about to leave, and the carriage is starting to leave, somebody runs after him and says, excuse me, excuse me. So the wealthy man turns around and says, you have the answer? He says, no, but what's the answer? He says, you're the one I want as a son-in-law. Nurturing healthy emotions starts with the quest for truth. Am I being truthful with myself? This is what Hasidus is all about. And in order to be truthful with yourself, you have to be able to erase ego. The way to erase ego is to start with self-mastery, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time. I'd like to conclude tonight, a little early, I'm sorry, with a personal story that transformed my life. When I was 20 years old, it was about 63 days before the Lubavitcher Rebbe unfortunately had a stroke. The Rebbe had gotten a medal from the U.S. Postmaster for being the individual American that gets more personal mail than the President of the United States. You see it on videos, a truckload of letters every day, between 700 to 1,000 pieces of mail. As a student, you can imagine the man that's receiving more mail than anybody else in the world. I'm 20 years old, writing my resolution for my birthday. I was not expecting a letter, a response. But I got a response 10 days later. A blessing from the Rebbe. What was my resolution? My resolution was very simple. There are 4 periods in the day. A period of learning before the prayer, one of Talmud after the prayer, one of Talmud in the afternoon, and another one at night. I wrote to the Rebbe that my resolution for my birthday was, because when you write to the Rebbe, you not only are committing yourself, but you're getting a blessing, so you should have the strength to accomplish your resolution and do it well. I wrote to the Rebbe that I would be on time at each one of these 4 periods, and the first 10 minutes, I would not talk to anybody. This would be fully dedicated to my study with full concentration. This was before the cell phones. How much more so today? And that's what I got a blessing for. And from here, I learned that the ultimate tool to be able to master your emotion, to master your time, is to start 10 minutes at a time. So today I'm going to show you my favorite application. This is my favorite application. One you have on your phone. It's called Clock. Whenever you see that times are difficult and you're not able to master your emotions, master your time, take the time to study, take the time to work on yourself. You might not be able to do an hour. You might not be even able to do 10 minutes. Put your clock on 5 minutes. Turn over your phone, put it on silent, not on vibrate, and take the time to do what you have to do in a full dedication for a full 5 minutes. Start it. Do this on a regular basis. And you'll see that one day you'll be a completely transformed person. And suddenly, as you work on yourself, one day you'll wake up and you'll be a full master of every single one of your emotions. Thank you very much for joining JNet. It's an utmost pleasure to be a partner in this great way. Be able to share words of Torah. And as we're approaching Lag BaOmer, which is Hod Shebehod, which means humility within humility, let us recognize that the greatest humility is when we recognize who we are and we live up to who we are with the greatest strength, knowing that that power, that greatest strength comes from Hashem. And the only way it can come fully from Hashem is when we put our ego aside. God bless you, and may the zchut of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai accompany us and bring us to the final redemption with Mashiach, when we will all see the truth and peace in the world. God bless you.